morning. Firstly, thank you all for taking the time and investing your time into being here today and learning a little bit more about branding and how it can benefit your business long term. As mentioned, my name is Amanda and I'm a brand strategist. I work with startups and rebranding, businesses looking to rebrand. And I'm here to talk to you today about branding, but more importantly, how we can all build a sustainable brand. And that's very important. So a sustainable brand that will build value with your customers, build, sorry, I've just lost my train of thought. Build loyalty and build longevity with your brand. We need to firstly understand that our brand is the intentional perception that we communicate with our market. And I say intentionally, because we all have a perception, whether we've controlled it or whether we've created it. So a brand is how we control how our market perceive us. It's how we control the story that they tell and how they refer. It's how we communicate our message and what we truly want to communicate with our market. In order to create this perception, we need to incorporate the fundamental of clarity, being so clear about ourselves. We need to understand our target market and what they actually want to understand. What do they want to hear from us, not what we want to tell them. The second important part about clarity is that we need to have our team, our employees, our business associates understand what our brand is. We need them to understand what our purpose is, what our mission is, and what we're there to achieve, because they're our best brand advocates. When we talk about who we are, I'm not talking about the brand processes, that's the business. What we do every day, that's not what our brand is about. Our brand is about communicating that underlying solution that we solve to our market. To identify this, we need to look at our vision, look at our goals, look at what we want to achieve in business, because we need to establish a brand now that we can grow into. Often with the clients that I work with, they come to me because they've hit this glass ceiling. They've hit this point in their business where they can't grow, they don't know how to put that post on social media, or they don't know how to incorporate this new service or enter into that new market. And it's simply because they haven't thought too far ahead. They haven't established a brand that they can grow into and that can adopt that new market. And like I mentioned before, understanding the solution that we're solving. Often people buy on emotion. They buy into a brand. They don't buy why we do it, they buy what they get out of it, the feeling that they have. What problem does it solve in their everyday lives? People don't buy a Mercedes to buy a car. If they bought a car to get them from point A to point B, they wouldn't spend $80,000, $100,000 on a Mercedes. They'd buy a Hyundai or something less. So we need to understand what the problem we solve. And we also need to understand that that message that we create, that story that we create, needs to be consistent. That's why it needs to be clear. If our market can't understand in a fraction of a second what we're trying to communicate, then it won't get through. If we don't tell them repeatedly that same message, it won't get through. We're so bombarded with communications these days from different brands, from different advertising, that we need to be so clear that they can read and understand who we are and that message that we're trying to achieve in a split second. McDonald's are a brand that we're all familiar with, and a brand that do this extremely well and have built such a sustainable brand. To the point that they can spend thousands of dollars on a billboard ad, I live in Fortitude Valley, that doesn't have a logo, doesn't have a name, doesn't have a web address, doesn't even have a full bucket of chips on it. But yet, somehow, we recognise that as McDonald's. I love chips, I don't know if you do, but I drove past it and thought, I actually feel like some fries right now. Maybe just me, but the point is that we recognise this as McDonald's because they have been consistent time and time again. They've been so clear on their message that we understand that in a fraction of a second when we're driving past in our car. We also need to understand that branding is not a one-time event, but a lifelong process. Once again, especially in the startup phase, we always treat our brand as this one thing that we do, that thing that we tick off our to-do list, okay, we're done, we move on. It's not the case. To build a sustainable brand, We need to be consistently innovating, consistently nurturing, and consistently listening to our market to understand what they're after, and so we can meet that expectation. Which brings us to fundamental number 2, which is revision. We always need to make sure that we're revising our brand, that we're listening to our market. Sustainable brands are all about being relevant. So listening is actually an activity that I do with my clients. We look at the testimonials that we received. We look at the comments that we're receiving on social media. We look at the recommendations. Often I ask my clients to think back on the last few conversations that they had with clients and what they had with customers. What are those key words that they're saying? Because often they're the gold tickets, so we understand what they're actually after, to help us identify what that solution they're actually looking for. We also need to work out with our brand, because our brand is everything that's a part of our business. We need to work out how we're adding value and how we can continue to add value. We can only identify that if we're conscious about our brand and if we're consciously revising it, looking back and working on how we can improve it. And we also shouldn't be afraid to expand our brand. I would have mentioned earlier that a sustainable brand allows us to make mistakes and our market to forgive us for them. It allows us to experiment and to innovate and to be forgiven for it if it doesn't work out. So, which leads us on to my point for Subway. Subway are a brand, once again, that we're all familiar with. And recently they've just gone through a rebrand. And from the CEO, she said their mission and their purpose is about fresh, delivering fresh, healthy, convenient food. But the term fresh isn't relevant like it was 20 years ago. It means something different to the market now than it did 20 years ago. So they needed to revisit their brand, look at ways that they could add value. The expectation from their market wasn't there like it is today. So they went and they redid their shop fronts. They investigated what does fresh mean to their market, and then developed this rebrand to suit. Once we've gotten this clarity and we truly understand who we are, what we're doing, where we're going, once we revise that, we then need to ensure that we're implementing those discoveries, that we're identifying what needs to change. Because often some things in our brand don't, but we need to identify what does, so we can ensure that there's that consistency across the board. We also need to share these findings. If we change our story, if we pivot, if we create something new, once again, if we need to share that with our team, with our business partners, and anyone else who is associated with our business. Because once again, they're our biggest brand advocates, and they need to be truly clear on what we're about and our mission. We also need to be timely. We live in such a fast-paced society. If we identify these changes that we need to make, then we need to be able to implement them in a timely fashion, act on them. But we also need to ensure that we're implementing with quality, that we're not cheapening out just to try and get ahead of the game, or just trying to beat our competition. When we implement, we should always be thinking about our unique value proposition. How are we consistently working to be different? Not better, but different. And then that comes back to adding value to our clients. We need to think of, I challenge you today to, when you leave here, to think of yourself as a brand and not just a business. Because a brand is everything. A brand works intertwined with your business. It affects every element. It affects your customer service, your print material, the way you talk, the way you move, the way you dress, the way you interact. It all generates that perception. And we need to keep that perception consistent. And we need to control it so we can ensure that when we're not in the room, that we know exactly what our clients and our customers are going to be saying about us. Thank you.